Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest Retail ThinkTank brainstorming session. The Retail ThinkTank is where the Retail Touchpoints team is bringing together the best and brightest in the industry to talk about the latest industry news, developments, and trends, and most importantly, to uncover ways that brands and retailers can capitalize on new business opportunities. I'm Jessie Dowd, Senior Editor of Retail Touchpoints, and today I'm talking with Matt Moorut, Senior Principal Analyst for Gartner for Marketers. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us, Matt.
Of course.
I'm so excited to have you on the line with me today because we're going to be exploring the sustainability movement and in particular, the impact on the fashion industry. According to a Gartner study, 63% of consumers say climate change is an urgent and pressing issue. Matt, do you think this is a permanent shift in consumer behavior, and which consumer segments are paying more attention to sustainability?
Yeah, so it definitely is a permanent shift in consumer behavior. Actually, it's been happening for years, and the unfortunate thing is that climate change probably isn't going to become less of a pressing issue anytime soon. If you look at things like Google Trends data, actually, you can see that searches for sustainable fashion, just as a sort of medium for looking into sort of consumer interest in the topic, it's been increasing sort of year on year, every single year since 2014. So it's a long-term trend. In terms of the consumer segments that are paying the most attention, then actually it's the younger people, generally speaking. You can see that in the fact that resale sites tilt young in terms of the demographic that are using them. But even in terms of some of the Gartner stats that we've seen, Gen Z tend to rank sustainability as one of the very highest values actually that they hold. And then the only demographic grouping behind that actually is young millennials. So from a sort of future focused perspective, whether we're sort of looking at whether this is going to last for a long time or not, the fact that this is such a core value for those younger consumers as they sort of become older, this isn't a value that's likely to sort of disappear anytime soon, but one that's going to continue for a good long time, I think.
That's a really good point. So with the increased focus on sustainability and in fashion in particular, it's expected to grow. So how is this impacting consumers' brand choices and their spending?
Yeah, so I mean, Gartner surveys consumers all the time, and actually you can see, even of younger demographics, just to start with them, 64% of Gen Z say that, Gen Z I should say, say that they'll pay more for sustainable products than they would for non-sustainable products. And that's backed up by surveys from a number of different organizations. I think McKinsey say 30% will pay more for products that have less of a negative impact on the environment, generally speaking. But it's not just surveys. Actually, we can see that consumers are actually putting their hands into the back pockets. 13% of consumers are turning to secondhand apparel just to reduce their environmental impact. And what's quite interesting here from a brand perspective is that customers themselves add more pressure, I should say, to brands to invest in socially conscious initiatives than investors do, or regulators, or even employees. So it's a good thing that these customers are sort of adding that pressure that sort of gives an incentive to brands. And it's happening in terms of the actual sort of bottom line sales that are going through.
So what does this all mean for fashion brands? How can they adapt to this demand for more socially responsible and eco-friendly practices?
Yeah, so there's a few ways. I'm kind of optimistic, I think, is the way I would put it. So you can see just in terms of sort of the annual statements that fashion brands will release. I think the Business of Fashion said that mentions of sustainability rose 33% last year. But actually, some of the Gartner insights that we've got show that 92% of businesses have increased investments in their sustainability programs since 2017. And actually, if you look forwards to 2023, 93% of those businesses plan to increase further. So businesses are actually moving in the right direction here. There's a sort of sales opportunity underneath it all, like we were just talking about. So brands effectively can sell more by embracing and promoting socially responsible practices. And I think that's the way that brands can really adopt here, or adapt even. The less mature organizations that we've seen are likely to benefit from the increased brand reputation and potentially extra sales. But actually, what we've done is looked into organizations that are more mature in terms of their social programs. And you can actually see they're much more likely to say that innovation in products and services is one of the top benefits of their sustainability program. So that could be the likes of Matches Fashion or Gucci or Glossier just reducing the tissue paper and sort of offering eco-friendly options in packaging that actually saves them money, and it hopefully helps the environment as well. So there's sort of moves forwards that brands can actually take that not only sort of increase their brand sort of value towards sustainability, but actually do some good in terms of sort of business innovation as well.
The ultimate win-win.
Exactly, yeah.
So, can you share some recent examples? You mentioned a couple brands just now, but are there some other fashion brands that you think are embracing the sustainability revolution in a way that's resonating exceptionally well with today's consumers?
Yeah, definitely. I think from my perspective, one of the most interesting things is the way that brands are just moving in sort of further into resale, actually. So Kering recently sort of put a stake in the ground with the Vestiaire Collective, and actually before that, Gucci had been partnering with The Real for some of the sort of offerings that they had there. And actually what I really like about that is the way that it sort of adds another service to consumers who can then sort of engage with the brand sort of further down the line. But it means that there's definitely that sort of mark of authenticity. So it's good from the brand's perspective. And at the same time, it sort of increases circularity and reduces waste. So sort of a virtuous circle and a win-win, like you say. One of the sort of best examples that I've seen just in terms of actual sort of ROI and benefit from this is from Farfetch, actually. So Farfetch launched Good On You as a certification last year. And so that's for products that are certified materials or whether they're sort of pre-owned or from an ethical brand. And since they launched that, products with that kind of certification grew 3.4 times faster than the marketplace average during 2020. Its conscious pages grew by about 400%, and its Second Life program, so another one of its resale type programs, grew by about 530%. So huge increases beyond actually the level that they were growing at across the marketplace at large. So you can see just how important this is and how good it can be for a business to get it right. So again, I'm an optimist. I'm hoping that this is sort of encouragement for further brands to get involved.
So, with so many brands dipping their toes and diving straight into sustainability, what ways should they be communicating the sustainability journey to their consumers?
Yeah, so there are a few potential pitfalls as well as ways to do this in a good way that consumers sort of actually appreciate. Generally speaking, it's all around being as transparent as you possibly can, being really clear. I think the best examples that we've seen are brands who are not only clear about the targets and the ambitions that they have, but actually hold themselves to account with metrics for how they've looked to sort of meet prior targets as well. Really as well, if you're talking about sort of future targets, being transparent about the challenges to come, I think is something that as a consumer, you're willing to sort of see. You know, no one expects this to be a really easy journey. But sometimes brands can kind of shy away from saying things like, this is going to be difficult and it's going to take some resources to put behind it. But really thinking about that kind of transparency means that you're in a better position when you are then looking backwards at your own metrics. The other thing I would just say is that in terms of actually how you message this, it's important to actually be consistent, and not just consistent in terms of your messaging, but actually how you incorporate this into your sort of digital experience or your sort of touch points, generally speaking. So brands really should be looking to sort of how they can incorporate this into the path to purchase, whether that's some of those sort of badges that you see on category landing pages, or whether it's information about sustainability on product pages, or whether it's sort of giving that option of eco-friendly packaging at the checkout or not. Being really consistent across the board there gives more of that kind of understanding to consumers that this is actually a brand that is taking this seriously.
Speaking of consistency and transparency, that brings me to my next question, actually. So, how can businesses align and close the loop on their sustainability efforts? From an internal standpoint, what should companies be doing to ensure consistency and that everyone's rallying around the same issues?
Yeah, so my personal view on goals generally and having those sorts of internal goals is that having a separate goal for sustainability actually gives the ability to have greater transparency than if you were to, say, bundle it just into other areas. But regardless of which approach you take there, the real sort of the strong point that I would make here is that this should always come from the top and be a central sort of target that is set from the top down. Some of the Gartner's insights have shown that about 2/3, so 57% of organizations have set their centrally coordinated targets where they'll collect data, validate it, and publish it externally. But the best examples are the ones that really do have it coming from the top. So the challenge that you might have if it comes from, say, marketing or comms is that there's potentially conflicting needs that you'll have. Whereas when it comes from top leadership, the messages are really clear. So an example would be, say, Nike, who are now linking their executive pay to diversity and sustainability goals. Or if you look at, say, H&M, the fact that their CEO now is its ex-head of sustainability, that really gives a clear statement of ambition from the brand. And it means that you can kind of cascade that through to all of the goals across the organization. And it means that there's no kind of grey area in terms of whether we're taking this seriously or not. So really having that sort of central person, whether that's someone on the board or someone at the really senior level, I think is the critical point to getting this right.
I agree. Those are some great points. So we have time for one last question. And I want to kind of tackle something that has been going around in the industry for years. So greenwashing, we've all heard the term. We all know what it means when brands fall into this trap. How can brands avoid the greenwashing label and make their marketing around sustainability initiatives more authentic and communicate with their consumers?
Yeah, it's a unfortunate challenge that brands even have to deal with this, but it's just par for the course, isn't it? Ultimately, most consumers just won't look that deeply. And it's not the challenge that brands have is that it's not entirely up to you what consumers will be sort of looking at, because they might be looking at other brands who might be saying things that are just not true. The best advice actually that I can give is something that a lot of brands don't do, which is actually partner up with other organizations and form kind of an ecosystem. We ran quite a large-scale sustainability survey at Gartner not that long ago, and we found that only 4% of organizations across different sectors partner within an ecosystem with an agreement over targets and measurement. But again, we were sort of cutting that for organizations that are like high maturity in terms of their sustainability initiatives and lower maturity. And you can see that the higher maturity organizations are much more likely to form those sorts of ecosystems. And an example of that working in the fashion industry is the Fashion Pact that Kering sort of pioneered alongside a lot of other organizations. But if you're doing that, you can ensure that your peers are also holding to that same sort of standard as you are and really hold each other to account. The other side of this, I think, is really the key advice is just to live your values. My role is I get the joy of talking to a lot of different organizations, and unfortunately after the Black Lives Matter movement last year, a lot of them were actually worried about the fact that they couldn't talk about issues because they didn't think that they could hold themselves up to the scrutiny. But actually, if you're living your values, that allows you that kind of consistency in the messaging like we were talking about earlier. It means that you can be really clear in terms of what you're actually looking to achieve. You can be vocal in calling out some of those greenwashers potentially if you go really far. But it all sort of just means that you can hopefully cut through the greenwashing noise with some sort of certainty. And even if you can't, then at least you'll have made a difference in terms of your product and service offerings. If you are innovating and getting those win-wins, it's likely you're going to be more efficient because of some of those innovations and some of the sort of extra sales. And ultimately, hopefully, you'll be doing less harm to the planet as well. So even if you can't cut through the greenwashing, then by living your values, that's a great way of sort of making a business change for the positive. So that's really the advice I think I would give to any business trying to sort of get involved and really find success.
Well, thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your insights with us today and sitting down to take the time and chat with me. And to all of you out there looking for more insights from Matt and our other experts, you can dig into our Retail Think Tank Hub, where we have a wealth of fantastic resources. We're exploring everything from new revenue models to personalization, omni-channel orchestration, consumer trends, and much more. So be on the lookout for more great conversations like this one in coming weeks. And if you have any suggestions or feedback, please let us know in the comments below. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.